me this, riddle me that. Is this another good movie starring the Bat? Well, I'm sorry to say that this is not a good movie. It's a great one. There is so much in this film to love and gush over, especially for diehard Batman fans, with only a few minor things that hold it back from being as great as it could have been. Let me also say real quick that I am not a diehard Batman fan. My best friend definitely is, and he turned me into a big fan with all our discussions and geek out sessions over this amazing, broken, and intense character. I've seen all the live-action movies and animated films for better or for worse, played many of the video games, especially the Arkham games, which are damn near perfect Batman stories, and I even own a few hardcover Batman stories like The Killing Joke and Batman R.I.P. But even though I love this character and this universe, Batman will always take second rank to my favorite character of all time, Spidey. Actually, my two favorite movies of all time happen to be the sequels starring those two characters. All this isn't actually that important, but if I'm going to talk about this movie, I want it to be very clear where I stand with the character of Batman. Now, the trailers promised that this would be a bold, intense cinematic take on this legendary character and his amazing rogues gallery, but I truly wasn't prepared for how well realized the entire universe of Batman would actually be. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get started. I feel like I can't talk about the opening of this movie without mentioning The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight still has one of the most iconic opening scenes of all time, and it still holds up almost 15 years later. It's nail-bitingly tense, it throws you right into the middle of the action and fills the rest of it with tension, suspense, a little levity, and a truly terrifying intro to one of the best movie villains of all time, Heath Ledger's Joker. Rest in peace, Heath. You are a hell of a talent. That is one of the greatest openings to a film I've ever seen. Yet Matt Reeves and his entire team had zero interest in creating another opening to The Dark Knight. Instead, what we got is more akin to a chilling, horrifying act of violence that would fit just as well as David Fincher's Zodiac as it does here. And I know that's not really surprising to anybody who's read or watched any interview with Matt Reeves talking about this movie. Considering horror is probably my favorite film genre, the decision to start this movie in straight-up horror territory was an amazing one that I applaud with two hands planted firmly in front of my face. This is more than just an intro to a villain. This is a tense, scary intro that paints a portrait of a villain who is unstable, psychotic, and capable of some horrible atrocities. And the film only gets better from there. We're then treated to a scene that gives Batman the respect he deserves by fully playing into the idea of him being a larger-than-life agent of vengeance that strikes fear into the hearts of Gotham's criminals, capped off by that brutal fight scene shown in the trailers right out of the Arkham games. From there, the Batman discovers the Riddler's first victim in Riddle with the help of a certain familiar mustachioed pal at the GCPD, Jim Gordon. Bruce's further investigation into the Riddler leads him face-to-face with Selina Kyle, who reluctantly agrees to work together to bring the Riddler to justice. The film kind of turns into a detective neo-noir movie at that point, with some horror elements thrown in, as we see Batman, Catwoman, and Gordon slowly unravel the mystery behind the Riddler murders, culminating in an unforgettable, climactic third-act finale that completes a unique character arc for Bruce Wayne and the Batman that hasn't really been seen on film yet. That's as much as I'll say on the plot. For Batman fans out there, there aren't too many quote-unquote spoilers that I can give that will truly surprise you, especially if you have an extensive knowledge of many of his defining stories, like The Long Halloween, for instance. But the fun of this film is more than just the mystery. It's the fact that you're thrown into an authentic, stunning Gotham City full of fresh, interesting takes on characters we know and have seen before, and that it takes them seriously and truly respects the legacy of one of the most iconic detectives of all time. So, speaking of that detective, how is Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne? Well, let's take a look at some past Batmen we've gotten and see how he compares. Michael Keaton's Batman was a badass, yet slightly sadistic hero that played Bruce Wayne as a slightly arrogant but well-meaning rich personality. Christian Bale's Batman was strong and calculating, a selfless hero that fully understands what it means to choose that life, and his Bruce Wayne was portrayed as a cocky playboy with extravagance and the occasional supermodel on his arm. Now, Ben Affleck's Batman was more of a mixed case. When we met him in Batman v Superman, he was hardened, defeated, ruthless, and could clearly care less about his no-killing rule, something that definitely strays from the mythos and feels just a little too Snyder for Batman. We also don't get too much time to understand his Bruce Wayne outside of a couple scenes out of costume in Batman v Superman. The plot of those films drove the character way more than his character ever did, and it really only felt like he was starting to hit his stride in the Snyder Cut as he became an honorable leader with hope, as opposed to the jaded, violent psycho we saw in Batman v Superman. Too bad the Snyderverse is dead. Anyway, Robert Pattinson is shown as a Bruce Wayne that wants nothing to do with well, being Bruce Wayne. He's still a billionaire orphan, sure, but it's very clear from the first time we see him unmasked that this Bruce is obsessed with the Batman and feels like this is something he truly needs to do and that he can't feel complete without it. His Bruce Wayne isn't cocky. He isn't eccentric. He isn't a rich playboy. This is only his second year into Batman and he's not really there yet. He's a man with a clearly damaged psyche that, when he's not dressed up as a bat and striking fear into Gotham's underbelly, constantly haunts him and leaves him longing to get back into the suit. And when he's in the suit, wow. Some people may be annoyed by the non-stop brooding, but to me it really works. Pattinson shows so much through so little, letting his eyes do the acting when he's in costume, and letting his Batman be more thoughtful, taking situations slowly so we can analyze everything and get even closer to finding that next clue or saving the Riddler's next victim. He's big and intimidating without looking too huge, and I absolutely love the design of the suit. It's admittedly a little ridiculous to see him shrug off shotgun blasts and automatic gunfire, but this is a comic book movie, so it doesn't really take you out of it. His combat style is also vicious and brutal, especially for PG-13. He sticks to his no-killing rule, though, and it's actually a pretty big part of the plot. But like I said, this pushes PG-13. I mean, the scenes with the Riddler, the violence, all of it could have easily been R if they only took it a step further. This Batman's also a little sloppy. He's only in his second year as the vigilante, like I said before, and this is made clear by the fact that he isn't really a perfect hero. He takes hits, he lets his anger get the best of him and lashes out in rage. He misses key details that end up coming back to haunt him. Overall, I'm just really pleased with this portrayal of the character. And he's not even the only one they got right. Everyone in this film is almost pitch perfect in their roles. I thought everybody brought it and did a great job. Zoe Kravitz plays a Catwoman that's smart and sexy like Michelle Pfeiffer's, but with more of a comic-accurate influence regarding her motives, actions, and overall importance to the plot. She plays off Pattinson's dark and brooding Batman with a levity and attraction that gives them great chemistry together, and she actually dominates during the action scenes. But the movie doesn't let her get too unrealistically powerful. This movie is so grounded in realism that if she goes up against someone bigger and stronger than her, she actually has to work harder to win and takes hits. Imagine that. All that stuff actually makes her more of a compelling character because she's not invincible. She actually has to work and overcome challenges. Jeffrey Wright was an awesome Jim Gordon. His actual friendship with Batman is explored more than it's ever been before, and they feel like partners in many of their scenes together. He's not as strong of an actor as Gary Oldman, but that's a very difficult performance to follow up. What Wright gives us is a Gordon that is cool and unique enough to feel fresh while having some really great scenes between him and Batman. Colin Farrell's Penguin was great too. What easily could have gone into self-parody felt like a much more realistic take on the deformed crime lord, which was definitely helped by the fact that the makeup department made sure that Colin Farrell was completely unrecognizable. He almost felt like a character from The Godfather was turned into a stereotype and walled into Gotham, and it actually works. I admire the way the film avoided trying to make him a scary character. Instead, they put emphasis on the fact that he's a low-level thug in a high-level position and doesn't really have what it takes to hold his own against a crazy vigilante. Speaking of Godfather characters working their way into the story, wow, was I not prepared for John Turturro's Carmine Falcone. His performance is honestly terrifying as he clearly shows how evil and manipulative he can be, and I was amazed that Turturro was able to carry such dramatic weight in this role while still showing off that Italian charm that, as an Italian man, I know so well. His importance to the plot can't be understated either, and he sells it completely. Andy Serkis is a great Alfred as well, playing more of a stern father figure than what we've seen before, though I wish he had more screen time. He's only in the movie for like 5 minutes. There's plenty of other supporting characters, but I don't want to be here all day, so let's get to the villain. Jim Carrey's Riddler was iconic for being a great encapsulation of the 60s character while allowing Jim Carrey to do what he did best in the 90s, and it's clear that Matt Reeves and his crew were doing their best to distance themselves from that portrayal. I mentioned before that Paul Dano's Riddler feels like he could be right at home in Zodiac, and I meant it. His scenes are scary, his costume is unnerving, his motivation is clear and understandable, and his passion, anger, and general psychosis make him feel very unpredictable. And he definitely leaves an impression. That's all I'll say about the characters, though. So let's talk about everything else. Holy crap, where do I begin? There is so much to love in this movie, especially the amazing visuals and cinematography that make you feel right at home in one of the best versions of Gotham City that I've ever seen. Though I love the 1989 movie, that visual aesthetic for Gotham felt much more like Tim Burton than actual Gotham City, while the Dark Knight trilogy's Gotham is basically just the Chicago skyline. Joker, I feel, came closest to giving us a realistic Gotham by portraying it as a dirty, crime-filled 80s era New York, but this version version of Gotham definitely blows it out of the water. I love how the film took us through every inch of the city, like the beautiful Gothic architecture of churches and older buildings, to the loud, extravagant iceberg club, to dirty and grimy back alleys, to the crowded powder keg of the GCPD, Wayne Tower. All of it's fully realized with an artistic vision that is nothing short of jaw-dropping, especially in IMAX. The sound mixing and editing were fantastic too, especially during the Riddler's murders or when Batman starts up the Batmobile for the first time. And don't even get me started on that score. Oh, screw it, I'm going to talk about it. Hot off the heels of creating another triumphant superhero score with No Way Home, Michael Giacchino absolutely brought it once again with a take on Batman that can feel just as dark and brooding as the character during the slower, more dramatic scenes, while bringing intensity and excitement during the set pieces. I also love the costume design. Everyone gets a unique but familiar look that expands on what came before it, though I wish Catwoman had a mask that was a little less beanie looking. Okay, now that my glowing praise is out of the way, I'll say my only complaint about this film. Don't get me wrong, I understand that Gotham City was always meant to be a parallel of big cities like New York City and Chicago, and you can't do that without having some commentary about the rich, privileged, and corrupt that run rampant in these big cities. This is all handled pretty realistically for the most part, but there are a few lines of dialogue that were a little on the nose and made me roll my eyes. They felt a little too current year, if you know what I mean. Thankfully, this only happened a couple times and is at least relevant to the context of the story, so it wasn't really enough to take me completely out of the film, though it did jar me for a second. It's also nowhere near as prevalent as other properties and definitely doesn't take away from this truly amazing movie. That's honestly my only real complaint with the movie, and it wasn't even one that brought it down too much. Yeah, some people will complain about the 3-hour runtime, but I didn't even feel it. And for those complaining about the third act, really? I won't talk about spoilers, but if you think the finale is dumb, makes no sense, ruins the plot, and ruins Riddler's or Batman's character arcs, you need to watch it again and pay more attention. This is a nearly perfect realization of the dark, gothic, and fantastical world of Batman, and I can't wait to see what else this team comes up with. Do yourself a favor and see it in Dolby, IMAX, RPX, whatever your premium theater experience is. It'll be totally worth it. Thanks for watching. This has been Anthony from Awesome Anthony Productions. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please go ahead and subscribe to see the next one.